India's private space sector is gaining ground, or rather leaving it behind as it enters a new frontier, low Earth orbit. LEO was once dominated by India's National Space Agency, but is now becoming a stage for startups to design satellites, build launch vehicles, and create space-based communication infrastructure. And back on solid ground, this new competition has real implications for India's digital infrastructure, from telecommunications to AI. So what is being built in orbit high above us, and how are partnerships between India and Taiwan changing communications in both countries? I'm Divya Gopalan, and this is Connected on Taiwan Plus. To understand India's satellite innovations and the rapidly shifting communications landscape, we are joined from Delhi by Shivaji Chatterjee, Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director at Hughes Communications India. Great to have you on the program. I understand that Hughes has been in India for about 25 years and was the first to bring satellite communications to India. Can you tell us more about what you do?
Yes, thanks a lot. Lovely to be here, Divya. And yes, it's been a journey which is now over 25 years. When we did set up a satellite communications company in India, we were liberalizing in the early 90s, and the government decided to give cellular licenses, satellite licenses, etc. And we were the first company to get into the country, create a joint venture with an Indian partner, and set up Satcom services in the country. Of course, at that time, telecom itself was in its infancy, and the internet had not yet taken shape. So you can imagine those were the early days of connectivity with very few kilobits per second, and that they used to run entire networks. But right now, of course, it's a very different situation where even hundreds of megabits don't seem to do the job for a consumer. So it's been a wonderful journey. And as I think telecom has evolved, satellite communication has evolved. And it's great that, to be one of those companies which entered at the start and is still thriving and doing well over 25 years later. I think that something to be very proud about.
Indeed, what changes you must have seen, and your company must have had to just constantly pivot and adapt. I mean, this sector has just gone at super speed, and I do want to talk a lot about the changes we've seen and where we are today. But before that, let's take an orbital view of the current state of the Indian Satcom market and where it's projected to go over the next 5 years. According to Ground View Research, a global data books portal for market reports and statistics, the India Satcom market generated over $3.5 billion in revenue in 2024, and it is expected to nearly double by the end of this decade. And let's take a look at market breakdown. Services made up nearly 70% of the 2024 revenue, with the rest taken up by the ground equipment sector. So, a few years ago, satellite internet barely registered in India, as you were saying. But now you've got Elon Musk's Starlink, France and UK Endeavour Eutelsat's OneWeb. They're both set for satellite launches in India. What has changed? What would you say is the biggest change we've seen in terms of the satellite landscape?
Yeah, definitely these new technologies, which is low Earth orbit, is the biggest change because they bring the satellites to a level which is 30 times to 50 times closer to the Earth's surface. The latency or the response time that you get is so much closer to a terrestrial option. And the other big thing is whenever anything is closer to you, you can have a much smaller end user device, right? Which makes it compact. If you have to proliferate into consumers, you need a user terminal, which is very easy to access. And almost by default, the minute you come down from the 36,000 kilometer geostationary orbit to a lower orbit like 500 to 1,000 kilometers. The satellites orbit much faster than the Earth does, right? So before you know it, within 10 minutes, the satellites move somewhere else. So if you have to have a service continuity, you need another satellite to come in its place. So by default, the LEO technology means you need to create an entire constellation orbiting around the Earth, whereas the older geostationary technology, by virtue of it being geostationary, they were fixed at one point, but then they would only service that geography. So by default, I think a LEO constellation is global in nature. When the satellites are not needed in the US, they are over Taiwan and then over India and then back to the US, that kind of thing. And because of that, I'll say almost by default, India or any part of the world is now part of this technology. They may not have launched the service or launch these constellations to necessarily cover all over the world, but by default they are, and hence I think it's a great opportunity. It's almost like a global leveling ground for any country to now get access to this latest technology. By it's like having maybe a Netflix on the cloud. Soon, wherever you are, if you have access to broadband, you can access the cloud and get access to the latest content.
So let me jump in there and just break it down a little bit more for those of us who aren't so familiar with this technology. So time latency aside, when would you say that LEO technology becomes critical for use and where GEO cannot fill that space? Where would LEO technology most be needed for use?
I'll say definitely in the consumer space where you're looking for a small terminal which costs not more than $100 to $200. It's most useful wherever there's a latency sensitive application where, like a video conference like what we are on now. That's something which will be fantastic for LEO technologies, and where mobility is very critical because, again, with a lightweight small terminal, whether it's land, sea, or air, it's very useful. And lastly, where you want a homogeneous solution across geographies, right? You don't have to marry different geo satellites. I think these are the few use cases where LEO definitely has a big advantage.
Okay, so in that case, what are your thoughts on recommendations for Taiwan in particular to bolster its communications through LEO, given its geopolitical sensitivities or the geopolitical risks it faces?
Yeah, I think definitely there are probably 3 or 4 global constellations planned, and three of them belong to the Western world. There's the Eutelsat one, which is France, UK, and two mega constellations from the US, which is Amazon and Starlink. And then there's a Chinese constellation called SpaceX. So these are the 4 prominent constellations. And there's another Chinese and a Canadian one called Telesat Lightspeed coming up. So what I'll say for Taiwan, definitely, given that some of these big constellations are from its close allies, it gives a big advantage in, Taiwan being a strategic, partner to all these countries. And of course, the fact that this constellation provides coverage in the areas around Taiwan also makes it, a great fit because more than just the island, it's the entire maritime around it where this works very well. And each of these constellations bring their own flavor of service. So if you're looking for something more strategic, for the defense, military, something like the Eutelsat OneWeb works very well, which is very focused on non-broadband use cases. They're focused on B2G, government, defense, secure solutions only. They could really have gateways and network handover points within the Taiwan defense. So, I mean, there's a much higher level of security. And if you're looking for broadband, general access, it can complement with these mega constellations. So, yeah, I'll say it's a great fit mainly because it's the allies of Taiwan which are doing these constellations, and they provide a homogeneous footprint with different levels of service based on the sensitivity of the use case within Taiwan.
Yeah, so at the moment, Taiwan is using OneWeb or set to use OneWeb. But for India, what would you say is the scenario needed for India satellite communications to be able to get off the ground, so to speak?
Yeah, India is a much sort of bigger country. There are different types of dynamics and use case. One thing definitely is there that the telcos have, got a very deep penetration with the mobile networks in the country, which cover, 98 to 99% of the population, but about 75% of the geographic or land coverage. So there's no doubt that the big opportunity is firstly to reach every last rural citizen in India. So the digital divide with a level of service which is as good as in the city. I think that's the big element. It's like when television, was cable only or terrestrial only, and then DTH came, and it offered anyone in the country, wherever you are, you put a dish and you get a high quality of linear television. It's very similar that in telecom, like roads, the more interior you go, the roads go from good to bad, right? And that's the scene for any telecom network. When you're in Taipei, you'll get the fastest broadband speeds, and as you go, the capacities and the coverage becomes poorer. With Satcom, it's a great leveling ground to be able to provide that quality of service where even a remote villager can, get connected, use the internet, use e-governance services, get farming assistance with the level of service quality which an urban citizen would get. Definitely, all the use cases of defense and military is a big element. And given the fact that India has been shielded from having the latest technologies for a long time because we've been a very closed space economy, working through ISRO as a kind of regulator come service provider with the Indian space policy, which got announced 2 years back. It's opening up, and it's opening back up in a way that we also have the perfect chemistry with the LEO technologies coming up. So when you open up and you have something which is a LEO technology, straight away from a maybe 2G, 3G equivalent SATCOM market, we're jumping into a 5G SATCOM world. And that's
Right,
a great
and
leap. So I think,
this is
yeah.
where I'm going to jump in because I do want to talk about all the various different points you brought up. And just for our viewers, ISRO is the Indian Space Research Organization, which is state-backed. So let's go to, you brought up many good points there, but let's take it down to the basics. Cost. You say that LEO technology would be great for communications, especially in areas that aren't very well connected at the moment. When can you foresee costs coming down so low that it can compete with the current telecoms infrastructure?
Yeah, so I don't think it necessarily has to compete head on. It's more needs to give an offering which is affordable, right? It's like they say the sachet model of a shampoo, right? It's not that per milliliter the shampoo sold, which is cheaper in the rural markets, but they sell a smaller size. So similarly here, Divya, it's about how affordable you can make it. Today, probably the cost per GB of a GEO satellite offering in India is $5 to $10, and the cost per GB of a mobile service is maybe 10 to 15 cents. So there's a big gap of about maybe 50 times, right, between a mobile and a SATCOM cost. with these LEO offerings, it's going to come down to about maybe 30 to 50 cents per GB. So now you're looking at a comparison which is maybe 2 or 3 times and not more than that, right? And then the ability to provide a reliable service, and as I said, package it in a way that you don't necessarily have to sell plans. Today, the cost per GB in India is low, but they force you to buy a lot of GB. So you don't get a plan which is, say, less than 2 GB or 1.5 GB per day per person. And if you want to take a lower plan, it's not available. So as a result, you're being forced to take higher plans, which then cost more to your wallet, and maybe you don't need that service. So it looks like the GB cost is low, but you may not need it.
Uh-huh. Okay, so one element that can bring down costs is competition. But currently, if you look at the global space at the moment, two companies are emerging as major players, Starlink and OneWeb, which is now merged with Eutelsat. They are the major players in LEO, lower Earth orbit satellite internet markets. So they've created a creative, basically a duopoly, I would say, when it comes to their competition. Firstly, how different are they in how they operate and the services they offer?
Yeah, there's a third company which is launching satellites by the week, which is a name you would have heard, Amazon. So they rebranded recently from Project Kuiper, which was a working title, to call Amazon Leo. And the fact that Amazon has given its name as the mother brand, it shows the kind of push it's going to have. So they have over 180 satellites in space. So they're going to be the third, player in the market. In many ways, Starlink and Amazon are similar, as in they are mega constellations of 5 to 10,000 satellites each, and with a lot more capacity, and looking to service the broadband market and traversing between B2B, B2C, and B2G. Whereas OneWeb is a more, I'll say, niche focused B2B and B2G player. They have much lesser satellites, maybe under 600, and they are looking at only servicing a specific use case, which is not the direct consumer, but providing sort of enabled solution mainly for the government and defense and also to the enterprise. So, and hence their whole network structure, the value proposition, the security layers, the quality of service, the service level assurance, everything is done keeping this in mind, that it is servicing an enterprise or a government user where these metrics are important. Whereas Amazon and Starlink are servicing mainly the consumer and broadband market. And for a consumer, it's all about lower cost per terminal, high speed, and obviously some of these metrics of quality of service or SLA and the security is not so important.
Right. So the one thing all three have in common is that they have huge financial backing. So how difficult is it, or how much of an issue is it for smaller entrants to the market, particularly in this space, to compete with these big companies and to receive that kind of funding needed to survive in this market?
Yeah, they have huge financial backing, and they also have Hughes taking them to the market here. So it's both flavors of huge and Hughes. But yes, no doubt, for mega constellations, it's about a $5 to $10 billion infrastructure outlay. You need to launch satellites every other week. Each launch costs tens of millions of dollars, and you launch a batch of 25 to 30 satellites, and you keep going. It's almost like a cellular tower rollout, right? So it's continuous. The beauty of it is you can keep launching it in 2 or 3 places, mainly in North America, and cover the world. So I don't think any other telecom infrastructure can be created by launching in one part of the world and covering the whole world, right? For any terrestrial or wireless infrastructure, it's all on the ground. So that's the, I'll say, sort of beauty of it. It's painless and it can be done easily, and the capital can be deployed in a relatively homogeneous way, right? You can just keep doing the same thing again and again, week after week. So yes, there is a lot of capital. It is rocket science at the end of the day, and it is not everyone's cup of tea. So that's why there will be very few players who have such a financial appetite and backing. And also the other element is all these satellites have to work in harmony, and they have to be coordinated with the International Telecom Union, which is called ITU. And you can't just go and do this. There's a 4 to 5 year cycle before you even get approvals to launch a satellite up. So these guys have all been planning it for many years, and they have the backing, and that's why they can keep going. And that's why the mega constellations are done by the richest people in the world, which is Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos.
Let's talk about the end users. Hughes has connected remote banks, ATMs, and offices by satellites for many years now. And new players are entering the market. What would you say is your strategy to stay ahead? And what other users on the ground are you looking at?
Yeah, so I'll break it into maybe three parts. Existing customers and sites, it's a great migration/upgrade option to be able to provide higher speeds and better quality of service and get a refresh of the network. This technology enables a lot of new use cases for the government and defense. Mainly, the government and defense in India has been very starved of capacity, and they've done various critical projects with very low bandwidths, almost working around the supply constraints the countries had. Suddenly, you're providing them access to hundreds of gigabits of capacity to run their network. And now the way the government and defense and the command and control networks are getting automated. Nobody wants to send soldiers. It's all through unmanned vessels and vehicles. So with that kind of technology integration, the need for bandwidth is very, very high. So there's a whole lot of new use cases which are coming about thanks to low latency and mobility and tons of bandwidth. I think these three things combined are creating a super sweet spot. And of course, the third element is the consumer market. In India, we never had a consumer Satcom market at all, although we have a very vibrant DTH market with more than 100 million households in India, but we've never had a very strong or any consumer broadband market. So there definitely will be a lot of interest if for Starlink and Kuiper and rather Amazon Leo to just take a small dish and connect and get access to 100 megabits of service, which is something which a rural consumer, even in the fiber world, will find it very tough to really get in the last mile.
Yeah, another sector which some would say that India is coming a little bit late in the game is in-flight internet, in-flight connectivity, which we're seeing in many other parts of the world. Is India getting on board that? And why has it taken this long?
Yeah, not little late, very, very late in the game. Again, I say that it's a factor of two elements. One is the stability of the airline market and the ability of the Satcom market to deliver a service to the Indian airlines. So the Indian airlines, like many sectors, had a hyper competition. Today, there are about 4 or 5 active airlines, and the market is dominated by 2 airlines, which probably have over 90% market share. And they have a stability, they have a strategy, they have good financial backing. So now you're seeing these 2 airlines embark on programs to connect their international routes with their wide body planes. and their domestic routes. And the two of the four biggest orders in airline or airplane history have been done in the last 2 years by these two airlines to Airbus and Boeing. So that just shows the confidence in their future of really taking this aviation industry growing by many times over. There are new airports coming up every month in the country. So that's firstly, I'll say the generic airline stability is strong. And with that, with all the things we discussed till now, with the solutions becoming amenable, when you have a LEO solution, it makes it very easy for a plane, which is a narrow body, small plane or a business jet to deploy it. Because instead of putting something which weighed few hundred kilos, used to stick out over the head of a smaller plane, and create a drag. Now you have something which weighs probably under 20, 30 kilos and can provide a service which is high speed. So that's again what the airline was waiting for. You may be coming late to the party, but then you really have the sweet spot of having the best innovative solution. And of course, for the long range flights, they will use a mix of technologies because the reliability, the criticality, the coverage is very important. LEO satellites will not cover certain geographies due to geopolitical reasons, but I think GEO satellites will. So I think it is time. Hughes has already embarked on various programs with these airlines, and I can tell you that within maybe 4 years, every plane which belongs to an Indian carrier will have Wi-Fi. I think within a year, every new plane coming in will have Wi-Fi, and the retrofit programs on the existing fleet are very much on.
Right. So we've talked about, basically the providers are the big companies with the huge backing. But are there smaller players in this space that are providing some innovative solutions that you've had your eye on in India, and anything you've seen come out of Taiwan?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of innovation in the Earth observation area, right? Because I think it's very tough to compete in this terabits war, of mega constellations for capacity. But there are definitely, I'll say, two types of things happening. One element is the sovereignty, which is there, and different governments are now realizing that this technology is not just for Satcom. It can do surveillance, it can do Earth observation, it can do mobile telephony. And with that, I think it's important that companies are understanding that they have to protect the interest. They've also seen that, if there is the constellation is controlled by a particular country, then there may be some diktats which could actually have influence during, war or sensitive scenarios. So it is becoming, increasingly strategic and important. So you're seeing a lot of dialogue happening, around regional and global levels between governments, multitude of governments coming together. The European Union has set up an initiative called IRIS 2, which is really an integrated constellation for resilience and surveillance around the world. I think there are very country-specific initiatives to set up these, and of course, many times the satellites are outside your country, and that's why different governments are coming together. For Earth observation and surveillance, that's a very strong use case. Much cheaper satellites, which could be done and specifically focused on these applications. So you have even India launching their satellites. We have seen even in the Taiwan market very innovative use of your IT and manufacturing capabilities, seeing user terminals which are really super, which integrate actually across multi-LEO constellations, GEO plus LEO constellations, and now even handsets which directly, whatever we have, are unmodified standard Android or iOS phones, which will connect directly to a satellite in the sky. So very interesting times. And as this terminal piece gets more active, and as we get to a homogeneous world with 6G standards where truly satellite and terrestrial are on a common standard, a mobile phone may not be able to understand whether it's talking to a cell tower in the sky or in the ground. That's when I think a lot of the core strength of engineering, innovation, manufacturing of Taiwan will come into fore from the user terminal perspective, and not just the satellite as a constellation.
Right, and so saying that, and as you mentioned, Taiwan makes most of the advanced chips and flat antennas needed for modern satellite internet. So to wrap this up, how can India and Taiwan team up? And I understand you were in Taiwan recently to become a new strong partnership in this field. And what kind of movements are you seeing in this space?
Yeah, I think for long we've had a very good relationship, especially in the IT and electronics domain, and not as much in the Satcom domain. Definitely with the kind of innovation and solutions which are coming, I had many interesting conversations. It was fascinating to see the kind of, I'll say almost before the market is ready, the technology is getting ready. And that's what is remarkable about Taiwan. I think they really have triggered various ideas that this is possible, and also the kind of way they've married different technologies is really trying to build solutions which are future proof and resilient. So I feel that definitely on the manufacturing, and in terms of technology collaboration and bringing, almost Taiwan is I'll say it's almost a neutral party in bringing proprietary solutions and trying to make it into something more standardized, which is what the world wants to see. They don't want to be stuck in closed systems. And I think Taiwan will play a big role there. And I think India, with all the innovation it is seeking to do, will definitely collaborate a lot. And of course, Taiwan has always been a very close partner to the country in many ways.
Such interesting times. We started the conversation with how quickly things have moved in the telecom space, and looks like there's no slowing down. Thank you so much, Shivaji Chatterjee, for speaking to us from Delhi.
Thank you, Divya. It was a pleasure.